How was that? Did you have fun?
It was good, yeah.
Cool.
I'd never done a podcast.
Boom. Now you have. We've never made a podcast. Now we are.
I know.
I'm hoping I did this correctly. I was trying to move, but not move too quickly.
It's a little bit odd. I mean, we sort of are at this advantage because we just like kind of
Yeah.
stare at each other and like pin you down.
And
here
then sometimes I just stare off at the distance, which I'm hoping in those moments I'm not on the camera because I'm thinking. That's how I think. I'm trying to stay it here and think, but then my mind's like thinking.
I was like, oh no, I haven't moved in a while. Turning slowly.
You could just like dance it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got. I don't even know how to sort of like frame this like inquiry because I'm a chemical engineer by background, so like never did anything sort of in the creative space. Like really scared to death to like be on a stage or like perform or do anything. But a number of years ago, I got into voice acting, and so I do explainer videos and things. I don't really do like character voices. That's like for my kids at night when I like read stories and stuff. But so I've gotten into more of the kind of creative kinds of things, like trying to get involved with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Brad has been gracious enough to kind of get me involved with another project that he's working on. I was approached maybe like a month or two ago with like a feature film script to like help produce like a movie, and
That's awesome.
I'm so like sure, like I'll do that. I've got no idea, like, but because of that, like I'm sort of like dabbling in these kind of like different kind of creative endeavors, and you're like there in Los Angeles, like working on these kinds of things. I mean, is that something that, in terms of just like the business aspect of it, and like how did you sort of get from being in Houston, dancing, doing, did you say biochemistry? And
Well, I actually switched to marketing.
marketing,
Yeah,
okay.
and so
Okay.
it kind of brought in the business side.
It kind of started to shift.
Yeah.
Like what was sort of the leap that got you to LA? I mean, it's just like connections, just like boldly.
I went with Accenture.
So a job
Yeah,
relocation.
job relocation.
So that's again serendipitous intentionality of like wanting to be sort of with the organization. And so I guess since you've been out there, it's just kind of been having these kind of
Yeah.
opportunistic run-ins, and
It,
kinda
it,
taking
it has
advantage.
been kind of creating the opportunity there too. I would say that for the first couple of years, I was a little bit let down. It turns out that people dance since they're 9 to 5 there. And so I am not available during that time most of the time.
Yeah.
But it was finding who's interested and available to work on the weekends, doing some things for free, kind of just to help start the connections, and
Yeah.
then kind of figuring out where to grow and who I want to partner with. And kind of who it makes to partner with on both sides, where we challenge each other to create something more interesting.
One of the things that I was thinking about as we were talking is living in an environment and a culture like LA,
Mhm.
where Hollywood is very much alive and interwoven in the fabric of the culture and the community and just the society there. How do you feel like that's influenced you maybe differently than when you were living in Houston, which just has a different culture with, naturally
Mhm.
different conversations that happen, different norms of what is just kind of what we know, right? Because what one knows in that environment does look different than it does here.
Yeah. I would say I actually probably lived kind of more on the fringe in Houston because I was working on the kind of that interdisciplinary side. And so
Mhm.
I was working that's how I had met you. We had the creative mornings together.
Yeah,
And
super cool.
yeah, it was awesome.
It's back when I first started guest lecturing at U of H.
Mhm.
Wild. That was an insane time.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so I kind of tried to find a similar community in LA, and it took me a little bit to kind of find as kind of multidisciplinary of a group, but still working on building that and still working on kind of creating those connections and opportunities.
Okay. Oh, that's super cool.
What is sort of like the future of LA as a city? Like we have an opportunity to kind of
Yeah.
establish the brand of Houston, and there's
Mhm.
so many different kind of anchors, sort of at a distance. Someone who's not spent really any time in LA, spend some time in California, but like what is the LA brand? Like where are they sort of going, like as a city? Do you feel like you've got like, I don't know if that's sort of a weird question, but just
I think LA is. I was surprised at how fragmented it was
Mm.
in terms of how many kind of different cities within cities. So each one of those cities has its own persona, its own personality. So like Beverly Hills, very different from Glendale, very different from Pasadena, very different from the beach cities. And so it's really interesting to kind of basically, if you look at it, it's a city of multidisciplines. And so if people are willing to travel across the different cities, the kind of the mini cities, then there will be a lot more kind of like interdisciplinary work.
So it's a bit more fragmented in nature, which I mean, it is a good question though, because I think Houston is at an inflection point or a tipping point where we're rebranding ourselves in some sense in a very organic way, because how Houston looks and feels has shifted and changed. I mean, as you know, I've said many times over, Houston is my favorite color because we're the most diverse city in the U.S. And I've heard some experts say because of zoning, we've also have an opportunity to be one of the most inclusive because we're not as fragmented by nature. However, we're also, you know, we're fourth in population, we're 89th in density. We talked about that when we were chatting with Jez during that podcast. And thinking about just the role that culinary plays in our community today differently than it did before. We have one of the top culinary scenes in the country now, passed up New York in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago. You look at how many Fortune 500s we have. You look at our tech and innovation scene and how bustling it's really starting to become. Groups like so many that have come forward to really be a part of this journey with us in Houston. Houston's changing. Right, Houston's shifting, and I think to your question, it's a really cool question and very timely because, you know, is a city like a Los Angeles that's so established shifting and changing in the same way that a Houston is?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily shifting in the same way. I think Houston, kind of, in terms of how they were built, they're structured a little bit differently, so they have a different foundation upon which to build.
Yeah, like at that point when your brand's that established, are you just kind of like, yep, this is our brand and this is who we are? Or are you constantly challenging that brand and continuing to evolve it and iterate on it and make it more awesome? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question because we're in such a different place.
Yeah. Solving for very different things.
Yeah.
And with LA specifically, that kind of made me think of that is LA tries to continuously push the boundary, whether it be in fashion, whether it be in any other industry, and tries to kind of be the kind of the testing site and the kind of goal for kind of the rest of the cities to follow. And so I think Houston is also becoming up there in terms of showing kind of disruption within several different ecosystems. But LA, I think, is trying to still kind of maintain that and trying to grow and bolster that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that constantly being uncomfortable, right? And being comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's a powerful gift that is really hard to accept because our brains naturally hate being uncomfortable. And so when you tell me be comfortable being uncomfortable, it's like, no. I can say no to that. Actually, I can't because I have to say yes because I love it. But
being comfortable and
yes, being comfortable and that's right, because and's the new no.
Well, my takeaway is that Anastasia is the Los Angeles of human beings. That there's lots of different things going on, lots of different dispersed things. That's awesome.
Boom.
Onward.